I'm delighted to introduce Professor Eleanor Bourke and Cindy Penrose from the Yoorrook Justice Commission. The Yoorrook Justice Commission is the first formal truth-telling process investigating past and ongoing injustices experienced by First Peoples in Victoria in all areas of life since colonisation. Professor Bourke is a Wagaya Wamba elder and chair of the Yoorrook Justice Commission. She has held executive positions in state and federal government agencies, where she participated in Victoria's first positive natal title determination for the Wotjobaluk, Wagaya, Jarwa, Jarragali and Jabagulk peoples. In 2022, she was awarded a member of the Order of Australia. Cindy is the Chief Executive Officer of the Yoorrook Justice Commission. She is a nationally recognised leader and advocate who is committed to improving the lives of the most vulnerable people and communities in Australia. Please join me in welcoming Professor Eleanor Bourke and Cindy Penrose.
Thank you. That button? Flashing green at me, sorry, thank you. Thank you to each of the organisers who have invited us to speak today and for putting on this terrific summit. I hope you've all had a coffee. If you hit that 3 o'clock, coffee time, this is the segment for that. We're going to do our best to do an on-the-couch session here on really difficult stools, so bear with us in terms of this. I'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners and pay respects to elders past and present, and to all the First Peoples in the room, including Auntie Eleanor. I'd like to start by giving a brief introduction to the work of Yoorrook, as well as introducing Auntie Eleanor. If a nation is to be committed to being transparent in the present, it has to be transparent about its past. That's why Yoorrook was established in May 2021, following decades of relentless advocacy and hard work by First Peoples. Yoorrook, as we all know, is historic. It is Australia's first First Peoples-led truth-telling inquiry and is undertaking the profound task of uncovering and documenting the systemic injustices faced by First Peoples since colonisation. It's also a precursor to Australia's first treaty negotiations between the Victorian Government and the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria. We all know that across the globe, truth-telling processes in their various forms have been very important mechanisms for transparency and accountability, and for that, Yoorrook is no different. Yoorrook has received significant testimonies from First Peoples government ministers, church representatives and descendants of colonial figures, bringing to light many historic and systemic injustices. Through submissions and public hearings, Yoorrook has heard experiences of First Peoples across child protection, criminal justice, economic prosperity, education, health, housing, land injustice, and additionally accounts of history through the experiences of non-First Peoples witnesses. It is work, I think it's fair to say, Auntie Eleanor, it's work that's been difficult and hopeful, exhausting, yet energising. Most of all, it's been necessary, as truth-telling is a critical process in achieving transparency and accountability, and as Clancy mentioned before, it ends secrecy and it shines a light. I would now like to introduce the delightful Auntie Eleanor to hear more from her.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me? Good.
Auntie Eleanor, to kick things off, we're going to have a yarn today. Would you like to start by sharing your thoughts on the connection between truth-telling and transparency and accountability?
First of all, I would like to acknowledge country, of course. We're on Ngunnawal people's country. And I have to say, on a day like today, I remember one Auntie Agnes, who did so much in later life and contributing to what has happened especially in Canberra and down towards where her people originally came from. So I remember her today, and along with all the other people that have made a contribution to make the changes that we've arrived at today. And thank you all for being here again. So transparency and accountability are fundamental components of truth-telling. Some say that is why truth still exists. So much of the past is not known by the wider population. First people see and experience this every day, and the most recent example has been the referendum. History is told by the victor and is written by the victor. And we've all been taught a very white version of history, of how Australia was discovered. The way we commemorate and celebrate early colonial figures who committed and enabled massacres and child removal, and the examples of Alfred Deakin, Major Mitchell, Edward Henty, classic examples of the misinformation early on. But truth-telling for us gives an opportunity to change the narrative on the public record. Truth-telling is about uncovering this truth and sharing it so that all Victorians can learn and understand the truth of where they live. Knowledge is power. When others understand what really happened, you, they, we can become part of the solution or create future solutions. An informed community naturally creates a form of accountability. But other accountability mechanisms are important also. For example, we have the First Peoples Assembly of Victoria, who've been in existence since just before the COVID hit, and they're in their third iteration, second set of co-chairs. They have a big responsibility in the treaty space and also in changing the way government is going to be working in the future around Aboriginal programs. The ongoing truth-telling, there's a desire for ongoing truth-telling in Victoria as well, and that will be likely a recommendation for us. And we worry about how our traditional owners can continue to do what they do in the land justice space, which is so important because that's where our stories and our ancestors rest. So ongoing truth-telling is very important for us.
Auntie Eleanor, you mentioned green button. Auntie Eleanor, you mentioned knowledge is power. On the topic of power, Yoorrook is a royal commission, the most powerful form of inquiry in Victoria. What are some of the benefits of being a royal commission, and what are some of the limitations of it?
Well, I guess the benefit is in the status that others might regard us as having those powers under the terms of reference. But it is a colonial process. Queen Elizabeth's name was on our appointment. King Charles is on amendments, and this reminds us all the time about where we are. And it's a contradiction today, I would have thought. However, our membership on the commissioners, we have a majority of 4 traditional owners and 1 judge who sits to assist us with our decision making. But I think we have it's the most powerful form, and the way other people react is quite interesting to us, really, about seeing us as commissioners, and that's another thing that we don't expect. But we are trying to, in our jobs, to extract as much information for this public record from the people who come before us in our hearings in a way that is digestible, useful in education, and goes on the public record.
Some of the powers that Yoorrook has under this mechanism are to compel witnesses and to give evidence and to provide records. How important is that for Yoorrook?
Before I go on, I should say just a couple of things about what it's not too. But one thing I'd like to share with this audience is that during the Premier's, this is Premier Allen's session with on the stand with Yoorrook, she talked about being distressed and ashamed to learn of the brutality involved in massacres of Aboriginal people on Dja Dja Wurrung country, which is where she lives. And she, in her statement, committed to ensuring that there would be fuller history gathered. The history we gather will be used for educational purposes in schools. Now, she's a member in a central part of Victoria where a lot of our people are, and she has very good relations with them, but she did not know the story about the massacres. The other thing about the Royal Commission that I didn't say is that it's not always trusted by our people because it's not something that we're familiar with. It is seen as overly bureaucratic. I described the instructions. We have over 20 terms of reference with subparts to deal with, and we have to fit it into a time frame that is not really the appropriate time for the size of the terms of reference. It should have been something like a 5-year inquiry from the outset. And then, of course, we had COVID as well at our start. So, but we're still going. We've had a 1-year extension. I'll just leave that there, I think.
Auntie Eleanor, you mentioned the Premier came and gave her evidence, which was quite powerful in a way that indicated some distress that she wasn't taught, and she was upset as to why she wasn't taught. The Commission also heard from Victoria Police Chief Commissioner, Shane Patton, who came and gave some evidence also, and he also had a historical moment. Is that worthwhile sharing with the audience as well?
With the shield, are you talking about? Yes, he was very interesting on the stand because he admitted in his evidence that in preparation for appearing before us, he had learned things that he never knew. So the same thing, he did not know some of these things. We wanted to follow through with him because it was the police and because of what happened in with the protection era and the welfare years, how people were treated by the authorities. We wanted to follow up with him that we were kind of making a compact with him, and it was decided with the other commissioners we would give him something that would be a reminder forever in the offices of where the police work. And we had a very large shield made, given to him so that people would see it when they walk in, and any of our people working within that organisation would see it and would feel comfortable. And he, after admitting that, he also went away and, not committing to specific things in the terms of reference, but committing to making change. And when he made an apology to the stolen generation at the League, he told us that he had a number of over 70 changes that were going to happen inside that organisation. And that was interesting to hear that, that work had been done. And it's an organisation that does have Aboriginal people inside it in doing different roles, including being police.
I think it was really significant that he came and gave you the apology at the League. He is one of the other 16 formal apologies that Yoorrook has seen from the government during its term so far. Can you share with us some detail around the way that Yoorrook is unique in the way that it gathers evidence and has has received this evidence unlike other royal commissions, and maybe some of the stories that have been connected with you and with First Peoples?
Well, there are a number of things that happened along the journey. We go out to talk to people, to inform them of who we are in the initial stages. And one gentleman who I'd never met before heard us saying Aboriginal or Aborigine, and he had this thing about it. And he'd written a poem about it for himself. So I asked him, would he give us the poem to take it as something to put into our official record. And so he's written this poem, and it's quite, I can't recite it, but it's about between Aborigine and Aboriginal, because we've had so many different versions of, Aboriginal affairs, Aboriginal Victoria, or Aborigines along the way. So all names attributed to us by others. So that was an interesting experience. And the way we take submissions, we have said to our people, you can do an artwork, you can sing a song, you can write a poem, you can give us something. And we have tried to assist that by using illustrators when we're out with people having meetings with big groups. As they speak, the illustrators do the drawings, and that's been a really successful thing. We've had many of those framed for ourselves, but some of the people that come to give the evidence and see the graphics and the illustrations, they want their copy of their session too. So that's another different way of doing it, but that will go into the record as well with the stories.
So I think that expanded notion of evidence to include all things artwork, music, performance, etc., is First Peoples let in a royal commission that's otherwise not fit for purpose in terms of the design of it. And the way that you've alluded to that is really helpful.
One other thing that I should mention too, I was given at a function where they asked me to give a keynote address, and at the end of it I was given a gift, and it's a digging stick that has never been used, and it's beautiful. And I could actually feel the power in my hands. The woman who gave it to me said to me, I'm giving this to you as a thanks, but because I think you'll know what to do with it. And she'd had it 40 years. And she'd been given it by somebody else who'd had it at least 20 years, it's not certain. So I've got a task for myself to write a story of that stick before we finished, just to say how it came, where it came from. And coincidentally, it actually was given to these two women. Both lived in a place that I had lived a decade ago, so coincidentally I'd crossed paths with that place, and it's a special place for Aboriginal people, Mount Yoorrook, where it has like a natural hollow, would have been ceremonial ground, but the football ground is actually in that space now because it was already hollowed out, so that's just by the by.
Thank you, Auntie Eleanor, and I can let the audience know that there are the privilege of being the CEO of Yoorrook is that you get to have access to those stories over and over again each day. That's quite special. Auntie Eleanor, Yoorrook will hold accountability sessions in the coming weeks. Transparency and accountability are important to the audience. The accountability sessions is Yoorrook's version of holding the government and government ministers in particular to account, so they'll be recalled. Do you want to talk a bit about those?
Well, that's one of the things that we have the power to do, to compel the government to respond to the requests about information that we otherwise wouldn't have access to. And that's been a major part of the work. And at the very first time that government was running late, and they got a month behind in responding to us with material and keeping to our timetable, we had to use that mechanism across the board. And it worked. They're much more diligent now about doing things in a timely way. Doesn't mean we always get the timelines that we want, but it's better. It's more responsive and turning the work over.
And I think from those sessions we've heard from community in particular that they're seeking those sessions where you can ask the questions directly to government and hold them to account. One of the other terms of reference that we have is Indigenous data sovereignty principles, and they are important for transparency and for accountability also in relation to how we deliver on the report. Did you want to talk to IDS or Indigenous data sovereignty at all?
Well, I'll talk a little bit about how we got there. I think the important thing for us is that, you know, the critical thing, the shock, the change of lifestyle, being moved off country, not practising culture, not being near, you know, where the food source, all of those things, being put on missions was a terrible, terrible thing for our people because it cut us away from the source of our identity and the places where our stories were created, and we had to cope with that. What happened, we had 100 years of protection and welfare kind of legislation, which was terrible. Took us into the 1900s where there was a spurt of population growth, where people started to, you know, want to know where they came from, all those sorts of things, and so started looking for materials, and there was plenty of material in the museums and in the libraries. And Tyndale, I don't know, most people here probably know Norman Tyndale's work. It was a national attempt. People wanted access to that to find out something about their ancestors, so it went full circle to where people were able to do that. So that's created an issue for us about how we keep and store that, because the people are giving us all of this information in a way that's never been done before, and we want the protection they want about how it's used to be on the public record. And so Indigenous data sovereignty is the way that we're expecting it will be used, and that means using it in the way that the individuals or the family want it used.
I think you rightly allude to maintaining ownership and control of records that you haven't received before and your own records as First People, and the ongoing challenge of that. Is that one of the legacies of Yoorrook? And what else would you like to see as a legacy of Australia's first truth-telling commission?
It could be. How are we going time-wise? I've got two little things I wanted to say about Yorta people. When the Yorta claim was the first claim, was refused, that was devastating for those people, and today it is devastating. And it's the most shameful decision ever made by a judge in this country. The most shameful decision, because they are a strong people who were on their land, who were practising, were living. They lived down by the river bank before they lived in houses because they didn't go away from their country. So that is a terrible thing, and we mourned with them. I was here in Canberra when the decision was being dealt with, and I would see photos of my friends in the newspaper on the front page weeping, and it was a terrible, terrible thing. But they've got past that, but it's very hard for them to be trustful of anything they do with the government. The second thing I'd just mention, another little family story. One of the elders who came onto the first People's Assembly first, Auntie Eunice, very elderly, very frail. She had been elected, but she passed away not long after. So in terms of hearings and how we take evidence, her 3 daughters didn't want to do it in a formal setting. They wanted to do it out at Conda, which was their country. And so we accommodated that, and we sat with them and they talked to us and gave their formal evidence with our people there recording. And it was so moving in one way and so emotional because it was up and down. There was joy, there was crying, but we were in the space that was their country, and we could get up and go for a walk to another part of the mission. And that was their desire to do that, and we have the photos of that as part of their submission about their story about their mum. So I just wanted to say that because
Beautiful.
that's another different thing.
No, thank you for sharing that. I've got a question that came to me when we were having a break before, and it's one that's on everyone's mind, I think, and with that sort of, nod from our delightful adjudicator, it'll probably be the last one. What comes next? So after the failure of the referendum, how can we have hope?
Well, we have to have hope because even though the referendum was lost, I mean, there were millions of people that voted yes. That's the first thing. In Victoria, we've had allies always on the journey, way back from Uncle William Cooper's days. The other thing is that there's this desire for people to learn, to hear. Why weren't we taught? Why didn't we know? And I've sat in groups with older people, much older people, and they want to know why that wasn't in their education. So I'm hoping that the recommendations around the education work, and there has to be an education piece that follows so that the curriculum, the history is told and people learn easily, what a name means. Everybody lives in a place where there's Aboriginal names. Who knows what they mean? They're usually descriptive, so they're really important. So all of those things are important, really, that the awareness, the public, people coming along with us, there just has to be change, really, for the future. Otherwise, we're going to be stuck, and this would all be for nothing. And given that there are other truth-telling activities in other parts of the country, I'm hoping that that will change, because there's even small groups doing truth-telling, organisations who have memberships. They're doing this truth-telling now for themselves. So that needs to become part of the education process too, I think, so that people are learning locally as well as through state education.
Thank you. I think we've heard from you that truth-telling is not an easy path. It demands courage, reflection and accountability. That transparency builds trust, both with First Nations people and with government, but with the broader Australian public. I think we'll leave it there. We're out of time. I'm getting that nod, like a lot of nods now, so it's time to finish up. Oh, you're agreeing. Perfect. Auntie Eleanor, thank you so much for your time and for your valuable contribution and your wisdom. Please join me in thanking her for her time today.
Thanks for watching. If you'd like to keep up to date with all our latest research and work, sign up to our newsletter. Delivered every fortnight, it includes behind-the-scenes updates from Richard Dennis, an exclusive cartoon from Judy Horacek, details for our upcoming events and webinars, as well as explainers, graphs, and not to mention the latest cutting-edge research and analysis from the team here on the key issues that are facing Australia. Click the button on your screen to check it out.